I'm Dave McCormick from Alpha Software, and I'm pleased to present today's webinar, which is the Alpha Anywhere demo and Q&A with Dion McCormick, someone who shares my same last name, although we are in fact not related. Today, Dion will be answering questions for anyone who has them. In fact, we've had some that were actually emailed in.
Excellent.
And I don't know if there's anything else you want to talk about today. Sometimes you have a topic at the beginning of the
Yeah, I wanted to follow up on mine. I apologize last week. I kind of showed you some templates, but I didn't show you the one I really wanted to show you that. So let's see if I have, do I have screen yet? No, let me go ahead and.
No, I'm sorry. Let me go ahead and get that to you.
Yeah, that might.
That
I wanted to show you guys one of the nicest templates that are in there, and I really wanted everybody to know this one because it's an awesome starting point for what you're working on. So, so in a moment you should see my user interface.
Yes, your screen is coming through. Yep.
Great, everybody. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead, like I showed last week. When we click the new button and we click a web component, you can have a selection of many different components, but in my case, I'm going to select UX, as we did last week. Now, the one I wanted to click on was this one, and I had missed it before, and I apologize to everybody. There's actually two of them, and I'm going to show you both of them really quick. But this mobile app framework _ panel navigator _ with _ tab buttons is a great starting point for any of your applications, and let me show you why. So I'm going to go ahead and select that one and click OK. So it's going to bring up my user interface here, pre-built. Then I go into my working preview, and you'll notice then I have a nice interface with a full panel card and a nice button list at the bottom in there. And I can click the buttons, and you'll notice when I click the buttons, it's going from page to page to page, or from panel to panel. So it's a great starting point. It uses a button list here. It also uses the font icons, which are really nice. They look really good. They operate really well. It also shows you how, if I go to, say, a iPad, you'll notice that we have these are going right there. And then if I also go to iPhone 4 vertical, it does those pieces there, or horizontal. So it shows you how it's looking, and so it looks really nice, and it's a great starting point. If you're just trying to put together a quick demo, this is a great starting point there. The other one that's in here that's a little similar but pretty close to it, it has a little element different, is, again, I'm going to go to Web Component, click Next, go to UX, click Next, and then pick Mobile App Framework Navigator with Scrollable, and then I click OK. And now what it will do is, it's a little bit more complicated, you notice there, but when I go into working preview, you'll see that I've got somewhat very similar, but check this out. You can actually sit there and swipe gesture to go to your other items here. And so this enhances it. So if you have more than just 3 or 4 icons, you can actually use the swipe gesture to have a bunch of different icons. And again, this works really nicely because if you look at it as like iPhone 4, you notice you see all of this. So there, you have all 4 of them available there. But then when you go to a smaller one, you just have a couple available, and you can swipe from there. And again, those are both in when you create a new and go to Web Component, go to UX. Those are both right here with Mobile App Framework, Panel Navigator with buttons, and Panel Navigator with scrollable tab buttons. And I find those are great starting points. They've got nice icons. You can put something really together. You can change those icons really quickly. And therefore, if you want to put together a demonstration for a client, for a business person, say, hey, this is maybe what it looks, you don't have to spend a lot of time munging everything. And then once it's built, you can go in and you can look at it. So for instance, this is the scrollable one. You can go down in here, and you'll see this panel there, and you can look at how it was built, the container style, the width of it, and the other elements to it. Panel footer, for instance, it's horizontal, and it has drag scrolling right here that you can click on. That's what this drag scrolling allows you to kind of swipe it and move it along from there. So these are great starting points. You can then just start adding your own content into these panel cards. You can go to the buttons like here, and you'll notice that this button is an image above text. You can double click the image name, and then you can say, okay, instead of a camera, I want to have like an anchor. Click that in there. you now, when you go into working preview, instead of a camera, we have an anchor as our second. So as you can see, it's very fast to modify and make it look. So I love it for my starting point. I meant to show you this last week and I did not, and I deeply apologize about that. And with that said, that was kind of what we had there. We'll talk about, as we get to the end, we're planning some formal presentations in the next couple weeks. We're going to tell you a little bit more about that. And in fact, I'll outline what we're going to do in the next couple weeks after we go through the Q&A section. So with that, I'm going to turn it back to Dave and allow him to check or look at the different questions and load them up and get them ready to go.
We do have a few questions, but by all means, please, now is the time to type your questions into the questions box of the GoToWebinar interface. Anything at all you are asking, no question is too basic. Some might be too sophisticated, we'll see. But type them in and we'll do our best to answer them. So this first question comes from Wayne, who asks, how easy is it to change a mobile application from requiring a constant online connection to the server, such as a connection to MySQL, to using the persistent storage so the application can be used on mobile devices with the data changed locally and then synchronized back to the server? So for
okay.
example, yeah, go ahead.
You were saying?
Yeah, so basically, can you create an app, or how hard is it to switch an app that was maybe originally built for using a persistent connection to one which can deal with occasionally connected data?
And real quick question, has it already been built with lists or using like grids before? If has it already been built with grids or either or?
That I am not sure. Unfortunately, this is an email question, but it looks like the person who asked it.
Well, I'm going to assume that the person individually has created one with a is a list component that they've already created that's got a connection into the backend database. So I'm going to go ahead and go through kind of walk through this and show you. So I'm creating a new UX, and I'm going to go ahead and just create a blank one for the purposes of our discussion day. I'm going to go in and add a list, and this will also show you how fast you can go. So list customers. How fast? Actually, let me make it a little more interesting. Products. We'll do products. Okay. So I've got this list on here, and normally I have to go through a whole configuration element, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in and click SQL and list properties. Oops, I'm going to select the table. Oh, wait, no, I'm sorry, I'm blowing this way. My apologies. Let me delete this here. Okay, let's go ahead and create a new list component. This will simplify things. And I'll go list products. And instead of going in and manually doing it, I'm going to use the list control quick setup genie. This is also a very fast way for you to put together your initial piece. So first thing I'm doing is selecting a connection screen, Northwind, and then the table name, let's say in this case products, field list, we'll get the product ID, product name, unit price, units in stock. Make it very simple there. And then it's all connected in there. And then I'm going to go ahead and create a detail view and all those pieces right there. Now what I am not doing right now for this demo is I'm not persisting the list data to local storage. So the intent is if I don't do that, then I'm creating a connected application. So you'll see in a few moments it's adding my items here, and I can go into my working preview. And even though there's a synchronize button on there, it doesn't really make any sense. Actually, let me change this. Let me go to mobile, and then let's go into the properties here and change it from purple to iOS 7, so it looks nice. Okay, so we can look at it, pretend there. So what I've done here is I've got if I touch one of these, you'll notice that the areas at the bottom are updating. So this is all on the same page. Normally I'd put that in different panels there. But if I go in and modify one of this to say 30 and hit save, it did a connection directly back to the database. So that I didn't have the persist data on there. So if you've created your control that method, then that works fine. But then what you can do is you can go into list properties and then tell it to persist the data to local storage. And what will happen is that will turn on the persisting capability. Now, most likely when I created this, this already had a synchronize button in there. I would most likely do the following: is if I were going down this process, I would recreate the list and the detail view and use the Genie just for speed purposes. You could manually go ahead and do this because you could copy the synchronize and then modify it. But I find that if you already, the Genie is so fast at building something, it's often easier just to rebuild it from that standpoint. But the answer is the list component, if you built it with the list component, operates exactly the same whether you're connected or disconnected. So therefore, you're not going to have to rip up everything in your application and redo it. The only area you may have some changes in, and you'll have to be aware of it, is that if you are in your, and I'm sorry, I didn't turn off my, sorry there. Let me go back here. Go back in here. If I did not, if I were doing some things like some manipulation of the data, like for instance, in my product ID and other pieces there, if I'm doing some validation or some other aspects like that, you may have to do some tweaking there and a modification from that standpoint. Because if you're in a disconnected mode, you can't dynamically make calls back to the server. So that's the only area that I'd have to look at, is that if you implement it on the list, it's a matter of just turning on persisted storage, and then it will handle that for you. And then also make sure in any of your other lists you're not doing like a dynamic callback to, like for instance, a drop-down list. You have to pre-populate those, because if you're in disconnected, you can't do a call back to the server to connect that. And there's some tips and techniques that we can talk about in future episodes on that. So again, very straightforward if you have pretty much a straight vanilla list. But then again, you just want to double check if you've got any other callbacks to the server. If you're going disconnected, you won't be able to make those callbacks.
That's great. So quick follow-up question, this one at a time from Richard, who's asking about what happens when two users modify the same record when both are disconnected?
Very good point. Very good point. Let me go ahead and show you an example of that. Okay, so I already created a connected demo, or disconnected demo. And let's see if I can open up, let's see, hold on, let's see if I can do this. I'm going to see if I can simulate it real quickly. Demonstration. Where is mine? There it is. Okay, let me see if I have it open there. Okay, great. I can't open it. So I'm opening this in Access. So I've got customers right here. So I'll enable the content. Okay, so I've got customers right here. Okay, so I'm going to attempt this. We're flying without a wire, but we're going to check this out. So again, I've already created a sample here, and it uses customers. So I'll go to iPad for horizontal, and I've got a set of customers here. So this is pulling data from my SQL database, which in this case is accessed. When I select a customer, I go back here and I can edit that customer, and then I click Save. And then I synchronize, and it synchronizes back to the back end. And you'll notice in that situation that there were no errors because I didn't have that problem. So we're looking at BLONP. So let's do this. Let's go, to show how this works is that I'm going to go into here, and we're going to look at BLNOP. Let's see, okay. So you'll notice that it says region right there. So I'm going to change this to test region, okay. So I've saved that.
So this would be a simulation of, okay, so person A went ahead and committed the change to the database. Yep.
I'm just making sure I'm getting the visibility there. So I'm going to start out there. So exactly. So the idea behind it is that, and let's go ahead and look at BLONP. Is that the one? Okay. Nope, I didn't. Which one is that? BLONP. Okay. Did I adjust the right one? Okay, so the region is test region. So let me go ahead back in here. I'll refresh this. I'm attempting to simulate that problem so you can see what happens and how the system handles it. Basically, it's built into it, but let me see if I can go back and select one. Okay. Okay. So let's go ahead and adjust this here. I might be pointing to the wrong database. Let me check this out. Bear with me, everybody. Yeah, I wonder. It's not. I might be. Let me make sure I'm pointing to the right database. So I'm opening up and showing you that. So I'm basically going to the Web Projects Control Panel, going to my Alpha DAO connection strings, and demonstration web projects. Yeah, that's it. And I'm looking at customers. Well, I apologize. I'm not able to actually show you in live right now. So we're going to do this. Why is that not? I'll have to probably go in a little bit more demo. Why don't we try and do that next week? We'll do that. But what I want to tell you about this, which is really cool, is that I can go into this, save it. It could be because my region, okay. Is that what I have in there? Yeah, but it's picking up the previous there. What will happen is when I change this on this end, so like test region 1, and I save it, it's saving it on to the local, and then when I do a synchronize, it's going to compare it, and you'll notice that it's finding a difference. Okay, so actually I got it to work. Little did I know. So you'll notice right here that I went into my backend database and I modified this row. The system here, it actually had the previous data set before I modified that row. So when I went in here and I changed this value, when it went to do a synchronize, it didn't finish the synchronization. Basically, it looked back here and said, oh, well, I was expecting to see my old, whatever my old region name is, but I see they've already edited it. So I have a conflict where someone on the back end edited that value for this row, and at the same time the person here. Now, the cool thing about Alpha is that it handles that for you automatically. So you'll notice that it's giving the user a warning. It says write conflict, tap here to resolve. And so it's telling them immediately that, hey, wait a minute, there's something out of sync with what you have and what the server has. So I click on there, and you'll notice that it's saying, okay, you can either use mine, which is yours out in the field, or you can use theirs, which is the server side. So I can say, you know what, I want to go ahead and modify and use mine. And so then I go synchronize. I gave it the instruction. It's going to take test region 1 and go into the back end and modify that. And sure enough, if you notice, this now says test region 1 because I overwrote this from the outside field. So that's how Alpha handles synchronization issues, is that it gives, by default, it gives the user the ability to modify that. Now, in the synchronization policies aspect, you have a little bit more control to say always have the user win or have the server. So in those scenarios, you don't necessarily have to have the user do the decision. If you want, you can make, you can tell the system during synchronization, well, if you find a conflict, overwrite it with the mobile platform or vice versa. So I apologize for a little rough start there, but as you can see, if I change this to hello world, okay, save it. It isn't synchronized. I go back in here and I'm going to actually change this. It's expecting test region 1, but I'm going to say goodbye world. Okay, so that should save that. Now we should see when we do a synchronize, you'll notice that, oh wait, hello world, I was expecting test region, so I can say I'm going to use theirs, goodbye world, and then now what it's doing is instead of using my mobile one, it's using the one in the background that I just added in there. So it handles all that automatically for you, so you don't have to spend any time coding. And the reality is there's a lot of code running behind the scene because you have to look at each field, you have to compare them, you have to look at the history and this and that. And if you were to code it up yourself, it would take a fair amount of time, especially when you start looking at multi-level where you have products and orders and order IDs and order line items. It can handle that multi-level synchronization, so you could actually make sure that everything works properly, and the system does it for you automatically. So apologize again for the rough start, but I think that hopefully gave you a feel for how we handle the situation where there's a conflict between the disconnected mobile platform updating the server when there's changes at both times.
Excellent. Here's a question about sort of a general question, but how many users or applications can a single server support?
Very good point. The way that Alpha, the answer is depends on your application, really more than anything else. The Alpha application server is sold on or licensed on a server basis. There's some elements of number of cores that are little nuances, but it's basically on a server basis. So when you purchase a license for it, you can put any number of apps on that server and any number of users you want on that server. There's no limiter that says you can only have like one app and 10 users or things like that. So it's extremely cost effective because you can do that. Now, the issue you'll run into is it depends on the complexity of your applications and the server demands. As you put more apps and as you put more users, you're going to consume more server resources, so you might start seeing just inherent, the more you do on the platform, the less responsive it's going to get over time, no matter what it is. Now, Alpha is extremely efficient in terms of what it does, but, hey, when you start loading it up, it starts going there. So what you're going to find out is it's really going to be dependent upon the complexity of your app, and the usage patterns is what's going to dictate the sort of how much you can run on one server. Now, the beauty of it is Alpha is set up so you can then add another server and distribute the load. We have the Alpha Cloud coming down the road, which will be on AWS, which will do that dynamically. So there's a lot of different ways you can handle that growth cost effectively. But again, Alpha is very cost effective. A lot of other solutions out there limit you to a certain number of users or apps, and therefore you have to keep buying more and more. Whereas Alpha, it's really going to be dependent upon the performance you're seeing and if it's acceptable for you and your users.
Right, and if I could make just a couple more comments along that, from our hosting provider over at ZebraHost, who has a lot of sort of benchmark data now from people running Alpha Anywhere apps. He said it's not unusual to have maybe 40 or 50 simultaneous users on a single app server at a time. Now, if you add more memory to that app server, you're going to get better performance from that server. That's going to work better. If you're doing a lot of reporting, that's going to slow that down because that requires a certain amount of processing, which is going to tie up the system. And another thing we often suggest is if your application is growing to actually move the database server onto a different server. So if you had a SQL Server, for example, as your backend, you could actually put that on a different physical machine or a different virtual machine and not tie up the server that Alpha is running on, so you wouldn't need to get another license. But we do have clusters, we do load balancing, and that's all handled. We also have now a version that's just coming out of beta now, which is the plugin for IIS, which allows considerably more throughput because we use the efficient IIS server to handle the web serving portion of it, and we just do the application server. So there's a lot, but I would say for most apps often don't exceed the need for one server. But again, if you've got thousands of simultaneous users, then chances are you'll need to grow beyond that. If you have a specific question about
just a little note on that, two things really quick is that with mobile disconnected now, we're actually seeing actually improved utilization, because since the user is doing a whole bunch of their edits offline and then synchronizing them in batch, it's creating less demands on the server. It's answering fewer requests.
Right.
They're bigger chunks of requests. And then secondly, we do have examples where literally thousands of users are hitting the server at the same time, or a combination of servers, and they're using load balancing. So Alpha has a lot of experience in terms of scaling applications. So you don't have to worry about, if I really become successful and I have a couple thousand users, we're going to be able to handle it, and we have the strategies and the partners to make that happen.
We have also now another couple of questions about sort of the subscription aspect of the app server. So yes, you do need to renew that every year, and you don't necessarily have to renew the developer, although it's probably a good idea to keep the developer at the same version so that you can make edits and things like that. The reason we suggest and the reason that you keep your app server up to date is just simply for security concerns. We've had issues like the Poodle security exploit. We had Heartbleed security exploit. When those come out, I mean, those are things that people just don't expect. They affect everyone's software. When you have a subscription, we make sure that you get those security updates. Some people have said, "Well, listen, I don't like the idea of um, having a license that if I don't pay or I forget to pay or something like that, it can be shut off." We do offer a perpetual option. You could talk to our sales department about that, which means that even if you're not getting updates, it will keep going. There's an additional cost for a perpetual license, of course. Typically, though, most people will just go with the monthly or the yearly renewal for their license. Let me see if we had another one along that. Oh yeah, also someone was asking, is it typical for the customer or the partner to pay a percentage of that cost? And the answer is yes. Very often people will do buy it on behalf of their customer, pass costs along to them. If you are reselling an Alpha server to a customer, by all means, let our salespeople know that. We often can cut you a bit of a deal since you're taking the risk of trusting Alpha and you're reselling it and bringing it into a company that we have never seen before. That's good for us. It's good for you. It's good for the customer, and we would like to reward you with that. So we do have some reseller opportunities in that area. But enough about business. Let's get back to the technical questions. Here's one which has to do with developing applications for a browser. I mean, would it be suitable for developing a desktop application that runs in the browser as well as mobile applications?
I'm sorry, run that by me again.
Sure.
My thing clicked again.
Yeah, no, that happens. So
Thank
the
you.
question is, if sure, Alpha Anywhere can develop mobile applications, but is it a suitable platform for developing desktop applications that will run in a browser?
Yes, you can. Yeah. By desktop applications, my assumption is you're still deploying through the web browser.
Through a browser, yeah.
But yeah, but the answer is absolutely. The neat thing about it is that all of the things we show work equivalently within a web browser and a mobile. So there's no difference in terms of the underlying technology. For instance, using panels and panel navigators, etc. The beauty of the web browser is that you have a lot more space, so you can actually put multiple panels on a page and have dynamic panels being created, edited, and modified, and things along those lines. You can put like pop-up windows, so often on a mobile you don't really have any pop-up windows, but in a alpha you could actually have modal and non-modal windows popping up for the user to be able to have them have some data that's still on the screen. You can also use tabbed user interfaces, which are really nice, that allow you to have multiple pieces of data open in different tabs, so it's very quick and efficient for users to snap right between the different ones. So let's say they're doing like job handling and they have different jobs they're working on. They could have one tab has one job, the other one has the other one, and instead of having to reload everything, you can just pop between tabs and edit things, etc. So the answer, it's a bit of a long-winded, but the answer is absolutely. You're going to be doing the same thing. It's really well built for that. The cool thing is you're going to have a lot more flexibility in your user interface because you have more screen real estate to be able to do a little bit more innovative things. But the cool thing about it is that you're using the same core techniques, lists, detail views, and you can actually even use the disconnected stuff, so you get very good speed. So you could actually be using that in the website. You don't have to have connected at that point. It's pretty neat stuff and very fast to develop, very sophisticated applications. There's actually some great demonstrations of desktop applications on the Alpha Anywhere blog that show some of the applications that have been built that use all of that screen real estate and is meant to be deployed through a web browser.
And it's also very common for a single application to have both a web version and a mobile version of that application, where where the web version takes advantage of the fact that you have a bigger screen, that you've got a mouse, and the mobile version takes advantage of the fact that you have a small screen and you're using touch as the method of navigation. So often, like back end or back office things will take place on the browser in the office, and people out in the field will be using the mobile version of the application. Another technical question here, this one from Curtis, asking about grids. He says, is there a way to link grids in a layout so that when you click on a record in one of the grids, the values of that record are filtered in another grid? So I can imagine invoice and invoice items, or a salesperson and the salesperson's order, that kind of thing.
Absolutely. And I could go through a demonstration, but I think it's going to be better if we have Selwyn show it to you there. Let me go ahead and actually let me show you where you can find those things very easily. Is that when you're in your development environment, if you click Help and look for this third item under the Help, Video Finder. This is one of the most powerful help tools that are available with Alpha, and it's built right within the system. And so what I can do is I can click on Video Finder, and it opens up this window. Now, I apologize again, my system, it tends to compress the screen, so you're seeing very compressed. But you'll notice that this is a list of all the different videos that are available. On the left-hand side, it's categorizing them. So for instance, grid components. Then you have UX components. And then miscellaneous things like XBasic, calendaring, video player. So what's cool about this is I can actually put in here and I can say child grid, and you'll notice something. It's already sorted and searched my grid component information right here. And it's saying, okay, here's an example of some different things here. So for instance, communicating between components, sending commands from one component to another. Linked content, placing linked content in a master template. So actually the one that you want, which is really nice, is if I go to grids and then I go into the grid side, let me see if I can find the right one. A great one is this video number 10 called Row Expander. That starts describing the prospect of, so in your filter, type Row Expander, if I could type here. And you'll see there's some great ones right here, and you can go through that and it will show you how to set up like a grid that's built into a grid. Like, so when you expand a road, there's like a mini grid below it, but also within here, within the grid piece there, is that you can have a grid in other content areas. So let's see if they have it on content areas.
There's also the grid. There's also the grid linker, which is.
Yeah, let's try link. And so what's nice is that it can help you quickly find a video. That's for like live linking a grid that's embedded in a UX component, but it also in the grid pieces there. So I can find that explicit one and send it over to you. So if they want to email in there. But I just wanted to show you, it's really simple. It's all you do is when you're in the system, go to Help, Video Finder, and in there it brings up this interface, and it's going to have a lot of like great videos on how to do exactly what you're talking about. And you know, the other alternative is you can look on YouTube. There's a lot of good ones in there, but it's not as well organized as in here. So I tend to find my grids a lot quicker using this here. So let me see if I can see where it is. There's a specific one that allows you to do a, yeah, I don't have that one right there. So, but the beauty of it is it'll allow you to quickly find videos that show you how to do what you're talking about. But the answer is yes, obviously, that you can have a master grid and then have a subgrid. You could actually have 2 or 3 grids and actually daisy chain the action. So like the parent grid is selected, the second grid goes off the first one, and then a third grid goes off the second one. So you can have that kind of like, you know, customers, orders, order IDs, boom, 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 and it handles all that for you. And that's built into it, and it's all point and click. There's no coding that's required for you to be able to do that.
Excellent. You may also want to take a look at videos.alphasoftware.com. It also has the videos that are available on YouTube and also Vidler. The advantage to that is you don't need to be inside Alpha Anywhere. You can actually open them up on an iPad and play them separately if you choose. So it's videos.alphasoftware.com, and then you just scroll down to the video library. And it's actually, this is an application that was built in Alpha Anywhere to help you find these videos.
Yep, this is all Alpha Anywhere, and it uses the video player. It's really nice.
Right. So we had a question today sent in by email. Let me see if I can find them here. All right. This one has to do, it's just a general question about importing data. Can you have your application import data from a CSV or an Excel file or some other type of file?
Absolutely, yeah. And the methodology I usually use for that is you can use XBasic to do that. Would you be doing it, I guess, are you thinking of, and just to kind of as a clarification question, would be people out in the would they be uploading the data and then importing it into their database or something along those lines?
I'm presuming that's what that means here. This is an email
Yeah, that's
question.
kind of my sense on that. And the answer is yes. There's no like pre-built component that does that, but what you can do is you can do a file upload and process. So there's a great video on this, but I'll go ahead and put this in there. And so I'm going to go to the UX component, and I'll go ahead and do this. And then we go to the controls, and then we have, where is file upload, other controls. Okay, so let's say I want to, first is I'm going to upload that. So I want to go into my click event, and I can add a new action. So I'm in my development environment. Let me go back a bit. I've added a button. So I'm going to have a button that says like upload. And then I can go to the click event, because when they click on it, I want to go ahead and do that. Okay, and then I go ahead and add new action, and then I have a file upload or file upload user defined. So these are pre-made actions that will allow you to do it. Now what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to use the file upload user defined. And the way that works is that a file upload is just going to upload the file and put the name of that file in a field for you. But what file upload user defined does, which is very powerful, is that it allows you to upload one or multiple files. You could set criteria for what kind of files. So maybe you only want them to be able to upload .text files or .csv is the term. So it won't let you do that. You could actually disallow different files. So if you wanted to do that, you could set the file size. And then the most important thing right here is you have what's called a server-side event called after upload. And then you call this process files, okay? And you'll notice in here there are function prototypes pre-built that will show you how to do it. So what's going to happen is the system's going to take care of asking the user what file they want to upload, and you know, it will, like for instance, let's see if this works real quick. So click OK. Let's just for giggles go in here to my working preview, click the button. Oh, I got to go into live preview. So it's going to handle all of the file selection and upload process. So you'll notice that it's saying, okay, when I click that button, it showed a pop-up window. It gives you a selector so I can select the files, in this case, on my local machine here. In the case of and so I would select that file there, and then I would click upload. Now what happens is once the upload is successful, then it's going to call this function on the back end. And this function, just to show you what it looks like, it says, okay, I'm going to process the file. So what it's going to do is it's going to give you a file array, so it's going to give you a list of those files, and then it's going to give you for each one of them the information about it, the file name, the content information, etc. And then what you can do is with that information you can then fire off, okay, walk through, you know, I know the file is on my server, I can now open that file, let's say it's a CSV, and then parse that file and put it into my data tables. And so that could all be done within this command that happens after you do the file upload. And there's a great example. I mean, in here when you're actually building your file upload, you'll see here you have function prototype, and they have a great example of, you know, a well-documented way to do that. And also, if you go to the video finder and look at the user-defined, file upload user-defined, there's a great video that will walk you through an example of exactly how to do that and how to process the files after the fact. And the great thing about this is once this is set up, it's using the mobile web browser out there where, you know, the person is on their web browser, they click there, it uploads it, sends it over to the server, and then the server on the back end then can do the post-processing of the data that's within the file.
Excellent. Here's a question about our partner company, Twin Peaks, but I know you've worked with them, so it's probably a good one for you to answer. And this is from Anthony, who asks, he said, I'm a long-time VFP, SQL, and Crystal Reports developer. He says, can a new person become proficient just by self-study, or do you recommend taking the Twin Peaks Research, like, 7-day developer course?
Well, either or. The answer is you can do both and become successful. The real question is going to be, what's your timeline? When I started, I started using Alpha about 4 years ago, and when I first bought Alpha, I got a set of videos and did my own self-paced training. And so it took me a while. I had to kind of watch the videos and kind of do things along those lines. So the Twin Peaks has a huge value in terms of accelerating that process. So instead of, kind of hunting and pecking for a while, you can literally within a week or two be very well ramped up. So the question really becomes, both are effective, but the question is how long you have to go through that process or how long you want to take. If you want to do it in a very short period of time, the Twin Peak boot camps are perfect because you're just going to be on a fire hose. You'll get hands-on. They'll take you through it step by step by step and get you ramped up very quickly in a very condensed period of time. Again, you can achieve the same result, but guaranteed it's going to take you longer because you don't have the guidance, the infrastructure, the structure that they have put together to help you accelerate the learning process. And so it's really a personal decision, and I think it really comes down to how fast and how quick do you want to get up to speed. That's really going to become your determining factor.
Right, and your budget, of course. I mean, they're not.
True too.
It's certainly a factor.
Yeah, but time is money. So
time is money. So it's really
So if you have to deliver a project in a certain period of time,
if it's mission critical, then yep, absolutely, absolutely.
Indeed.
Someone asked if Twin Peaks courses are available online. So the website is what? Twin Peaks Research LLC.
LLC.
Yep.
Yeah, I know they have a few video courses, and I think they may have like a remote training, but you'd really best is kind of connect them directly. They'll walk you through all their options.
Just talk to them. It's a third party, but they do work very closely with us, and we've heard wonderful things. So that's a good thing. Back to a technical question, which is it okay? This has to do with data synchronization again, and the question is it possible to have synchronizations that happen automatically as opposed to when you push a button? For example, when the device sees an internet connection or something like that.
Yes, absolutely. It's envisioned within the product to be able to do that. So a couple areas I'd like to show you real quick is that if I go into I'll go into my list control. If I go to detail view, oops, what happened there? What did I do? That's not, let's see. I think it's just because I was playing, oh, I know why. My database is open, so it's confused there. Bear with me. Access doesn't like a lot of people talking to it at the same time. It's not a good, that's why it's not a great production database. But it's usable, so from that standpoint, I have to actually get out and go back in here real quick. Bear with me. Basically, I'm resetting up just because I want to make sure I have a clean environment. Okay. Okay, yeah, there's a lock issue there. Okay, so I went ahead and I'm back in my environment and I'm double clicking on my list component. And then I have my detail view here. And you'll notice the fourth item down is something called synchronization policy. So if I open that up, you'll notice that there's a couple things. One is that perform client-to-server synchronization whenever user saves edits to the row. The cool thing about this is that you do not explicitly need to collect the synchronization. If the connection is there, it's going to put it in there. But if the connection is not available, it's going to edit it, mark it, and the user will need to perform a client-to-server synchronization at some time later. So this is kind of the first step. Basically, it says if I have a connection, go ahead and write it back to the table. Don't wait for the user to synchronize. Now, if you enable that, that's what happens. The default behavior is it's always going to store it locally from that standpoint there. Now, the other thing you can do is that you can also do what's called a server to client, is that the same thing is that if you have a connection, it will automatically go ahead and try and synchronize everything for you, which is kind of nice, because then you get, if you're doing that and you have a fair amount of people hitting stuff, you're kind of refreshing the database at a much faster rate. But again, you're using up more network communication because you're doing that at the same time there. Now, the other thing to realize is that that is a sort of the manual method we create to synchronize this is using the button synchronize. And if I click on the action JavaScript for that, you'll see that it's just running a little piece of JavaScript that says dialog save list edits. Here's the list name. So in my name, it's list, and here's rows and all rows. So this is a standard piece of action JavaScript that is generated for the synchronize button. So the cool thing about this is just JavaScript. So what you could do is, and let me go ahead and go in here, JavaScript timer event. When you launch your interface, you can actually do something like this. Set interval trigger function. And I'm into the JavaScript weeds, so bear with me. But there's this cool little tool in JavaScript that allows you to call a function that will do something, and you can tell it every so many seconds. So what's cool about this is that you can say every 60 seconds or 60 minutes or whatever you want it to be, call this little piece of JavaScript. So when your system launches, you could actually run a piece of JavaScript that starts that timer. And what's going to happen is in the background, and you've seen this on other websites where if you go on a website, sometimes it will be updating the time or something up in the right-hand corner. Well, what's going on is that there's a little piece of JavaScript on that website that every 30 seconds or every however long is firing off a little routine to update that. So it's getting the server information, the time, and then displaying that to the user. You would use the same idea. So you would use this command right here, and then you would use a JavaScript timer or set interval function that would automatically trigger that. And so every once in a while. Now, a couple issues on that. One is that you don't want to get crazy and be updating it every second, because that takes time and the system will slow down. The other thing that's important is that if there's a synchronization failure, if someone's doing something else and that goes ahead and fires off a synchronization in the background, you have that situation there. So there's actually another method that I would recommend. And so this is kind of like your I just want to synchronize every once in a while kind of scenario. And I might have to do a little research, but there's another method where, let me go ahead and go back into the list component. Let me see if it's in the list properties here. Where is that? There is actually a way, and I'll have to do, and maybe I can have this for next week. There's a way to determine whether you're online or offline and automatically trigger synchronization. So I'll have to do a little research on that. But it's envisioned to understand that, like, for instance, the user is out of touch, not connected, then they come back into network connection, either their cell phone connects or their Wi-Fi connections connects. They can then sit there and the system will detect, oh, I've got a live connection, and then can fire off the synchronization. So I don't know where that is right now. I'll have to do a little research, but I'll find that out, and we'll have it ready for our next week's presentation. I can start with that to talk about how that works. But again, you have multiple ways you can do it. You can have it auto commit, which is a really nice feature. You could then also automatically do it every once in a while. And then there's the third method, which is wait until you have a connection to do the synchronization and fire it off at that time. And I'll find that information and send that over to you, your team, or to the team.
Excellent. All right, another question here, which is, oh, this is a great one, and one that causes some confusion, but what's the difference between a list and a grid?
Great question. Okay. Just a little history. First came the grid, next came the list. So the grid component was originally targeted for desktop applications. And then what was great is that it matured and morphed to be able to handle web, targeted sort of like web browsers. So it is built for kind of rich, larger screen environments. So it has certain features such as edit inline, so you could have actually inline where you can type in there. And it's full featured, so you can use it in terms of either on a desktop or a web-based solution. But the problem with it, or not the problem, but the issue is that it's a very heavy component, meaning that it does an enormous amount of things, but it's kind of heavy. And so therefore, it's not really amenable to the mobile world. So therefore, the development team at Alpha looked at it and said, listen, we need something that's optimized for the mobile platform. And so they generated the list control. And the list control was born in the mobile world, meaning that it was meant to be developed and used inside of a mobile environment. So you'll notice a couple things about the list. First and foremost is that when you get into the list layout, and especially if I go into the list layout here and I say it has a free form, the representation of the layout is actually sort of like JavaScript, or is HTML. So the great thing about that is that it is actually rendering HTML. So two things, it's incredibly fast because it's using the native rendering capability of the mobile device to render this data. It's extremely flexible. So for instance, things like horizontal versus vertical, it handles very gracefully. A grid doesn't really like that very well. When it's showing on the screen, it's meant to kind of display in a certain fixed way, whereas a list has got the ability to morph itself to say, oh, I'm on a horizontal, I'm going to stretch myself out to take more room. Oh, I'm on a vertical, I want to do that. In fact, one of the coolest features of a alpha list is the ability to have what's called multiple layouts. And what's great is you can auto-select that layout. And so now we literally can have a layout that is used for a vertical representation versus the horizontal. So we can actually create different layouts that dynamically show themselves based on what's going on there. Those are the kind of things that a list does that a grid really doesn't know how to do. So it's there. Now, the only thing that, the list is a little bit younger. I'd call it, it's kind of in its awkward teenage years is the way I would represent it, is that it has an enormous amount of capability, and in fact it does certain things that a grids can't do, but it's still maturing. So grids sometimes are a little easier to work with because they're more mature and they're a little more database driven. But if you're going to be doing mobile applications, you really want to be using the list, because that list control is built for those mobile applications. And if you're going to do disconnected, the list is the only way to go, because the grid really can't handle disconnected data. It was never intended to be used in a disconnected fashion. So if you have disconnected or working really mobile, go ahead and start working with lists, but don't be scared of grids. Grids are great. They're very fast to produce things. They're very mature, so you can do a lot of cool things and there's a lot of documentation around that. But that's the way I would say between the different is that if you're disconnected or you want to target for a mobile, go lists. If you're kind of more traditional desktop and you really aren't caring about, it's going to be a big, nice big screen, go ahead and use grids. Put them together. You can put them together in a few minutes and have an enormous amount of functionality, and therefore you don't have to spend a lot of time tailoring it. So those are the kind of two kind of methodologies or kind of a quick and dirty high-level difference between the two.
Excellent. So here's a good one. So when developing a UX component, one of our viewers here is writing in that they have a text file located on their hard drive, and in that text file they have a set of XBasic functions that they would like to use. So how do you get the information from the text file and bring it up into the UX component so that it can be shared with that component?
Well, the question and it might be is, are they using those functions to generate the component, or are they just going to use those functions in the system? So let me take the second one. Is that if they're going to use them, you want to use the new XBasic module, because that XBasic module allows you to write code like functions, and then that is just a pure text file. And then you can link into this and run these functions within your UXs, your grids, whatever you happen to be using from there. And so if you're just adding a sort of a set of functional library, or a set of just like functions that you want to have available, then an XBasic module is the way to go, and the easiest way. If you're doing more like you want to actually use the XBasic to generate the interface, that's a more advanced topic, and I'm actually working with someone on that and talking to development how you would handle that methodology. So I'm not sure if I answered that question for the individual, but that's how you would approach it.
Okay. Yeah, and that's a relatively new function, if I recall. The
Yeah, XBasic modules was just released probably about a month ago, or
Yep.
actually within the last couple of months.
Yep.
But it's enormously powerful because very interesting. And this is kind of and I apologize, it's kind of boring interface right now. But one of the cool things about XBasic modules is that it's kind of the philosophy of Alpha, is that as Alpha matures as a company, as a development group, and as a development platform, they're really adopting the best of the outside world. So one of the patterns that they've found is Node.js. Whenever you have code in a Node.js, which if people aren't familiar with that, that's server-side JavaScript. The pattern is you have these text files that have your code in them, and then you can then use those text files in your projects. So what's great about that is you could create a set of functions that you want to use across 2, 3, 4, 5, any number of different projects, and they're just text files. You can add it to a project, and immediately all those functions are available to you. So that comes out of the sort of the pattern that how Node.js works. And so the cool thing about that is that you can reuse your code across multiple projects. You can organize your code into different text files that you use depending on the situation, and it's really, really powerful in terms of how you do it. And it's not compiled code, so therefore if you want to update those functions on a server, you literally copy that text file up on the server, and the next time someone hits that function, it's going to run the new function. So it's actually, you don't have to worry about compiled files and sending them up and making sure they're in sync and doing all these things like that. So it's a new feature, and it's a very powerful one because it adopts kind of a newer methodology to manage code, and I'm really excited about it. I anticipate in the next 6 months you'll start seeing code libraries start coming out where people will share their code doing special neat things using this methodology.
Great. And one place to look for how that all works is if you're in the video finder, which Dion showed you earlier, which you can get to from the help menu within Alpha Anywhere, or you can also find it videos.alphasoftware.com. The video that you want to look for is called XBasic Modules, and it's a video which basically shows you what it is and how to use it and what the benefits are. Let's see. I guess we plan for about one more question. Here's one about just sort of examples. Is there an example of a useful app that was built in Alpha Anywhere that you can find, say, on the iTunes App Store? And
yes. The one that you want to look at is called the AlphaRef Reader.
Yep. And the AlphaRef Reader was built as a reference reader. So we actually still intend to make our documentation available in that. That's a longer term project. But as sample data, we actually used the King James version of the Bible because it's a huge book built into lots of chapters and sections and subsections. So it made a really good example of what you can do with Alpha in terms of designing nice looking interfaces that work really fast and work in a standalone environment. Now, a lot of the time when someone builds an application, they want to use it for their internal use, for their company's use, for their clients' use. They don't actually want that to go up onto iTunes. And so people have said, well, how do I distribute it without using iTunes? There are actually a couple of ways that you could do that, and they both involve the use of a private app store. So, for example, you can get a private app store from Apple. I think it costs around $250 a year or something like that. And basically, it's a store that only members of your company have access to, and only your apps go into it. So that's being used by our customers today. The other is to use an MDM vendor such as Aperion. Aperion has got a private app store, and we are worked to integrate with Aperion as well. Aperion has some really cool features as well. For example, it can deactivate applications that people are no longer allowed to use. If a phone gets lost, you can wipe data from the phone remotely. It has a lot of other extra features which are especially useful for high security and for enterprise applications. So it looks like we're coming up on 2 o'clock, and we have run out of time. But if you have additional questions that we weren't able to get to here, please send them to guides, Guides, at alphasoftware.com. So I'd like to thank everyone here who participated. I'd like to thank Dion for presenting, and we hope to see you next week at our next webinar. Have an excellent day and take care. Oh, one last thing. Someone asked whether or not these sessions are recorded. They are. I don't always put every one of these weekly sessions up online, but I do record all of them. So if there's a session that you would like to see or one that you missed, saying, hey, do you have one from Wednesday the 18th? I can dig that up and get it off to you. Just let me know. Guides, Guides, at alphasoftware.com. Well, thank you again. Take care, and we hope to see you next week. Goodbye.